Oh man, like I told y'all in the live chat, I knew a few Rick James stories, man, because like I told you, my cousin Patty used to do Rick James hair, but I was a kid, so I didn't know too much. I've been in the presence of Rick James and didn't know like, whoa, that's Rick James. I'm just playing and running around, and they be Rick. There's a lot of musicians in there that my cousin Patty did their hair, and she was part of George Clinton Funkadelic Parliament. So at that time, that had no significance to me. I was a kid during that time. But, we got stories for days that we hear. So, Rick James is hot. He's the Rick James right now. But he's like tapering off a little bit, and he just came back with Cold Blooded album. And when he came out with the Cold Blooded album, it was like, Rick's back, man. This is hot. So when he got Cold Blooded, that's just bumping. Cold Blooded. And Ebony Eyes with Smokey Robinson. That album was on fire. So just those two songs alone was killing everything. So Rick is a little upset because while he's killing the charts and he doing all this, he's with Berry Gordy Records. And at Gordy Records, it's like an off-print of, Motown. But that's who he came in with. And the very next year, here comes a guy named Rockwell out of nowhere. And Rick James didn't even know who he was. But he hear the song, I gotta feel like somebody's watching me. And he's like, what in the world is this? And it knocked Rick James' song out of the top of the charts. It was the top #1 album and single. And Michael Jackson had just hit. And then you got this right here. And this was damaging. Kenny was like, Berry Gordy couldn't stand him. And he was signed direct, got a deal because his ex-wife, Berry Gordy's ex-wife, actually took him after he threw him out the crib. And Kenny was in there working on songs. Like, I'm finna come out and make my own songs. And he was working on Somebody's Watching Me. And they went in the studio, and he was Michael Jackson's friend. They grew up close together. So he drove Michael over to the studio. Him and Michael drove over to the studio and went in the studio, and Mike did the hook. So when people heard Rockwell and they heard him, they was like, man, that's Michael Jackson. So people on the radio, before there was a video, thought that was Michael Jackson's song. Then it said Rockwell. They was, who in the world is Rockwell? He didn't want to put the Gordy name out there and so it could fail and ruin the Gordy's name. So they was like, look, you can't be Gordy. You got to be something else. So he changed the name to Rockwell. Like, yeah, this songs I make, they Rockwell, so I'm Rockwell. Whatever. They can call it Poopy Dog Crap, could have been his name. The song was hot. And he didn't have another one, but Somebody's Watching Me went gold. It took the whole album gold. And they had a hit with Michael Jackson on the hook. But who ain't liking this? Rick James. So they happened to be at some like a gathering or whatever, and they had the keyboard or something. They was like, man, Rockwell is coming in. Who was this? Oh, that's Kenny, some kid. And Kenny said something to Rick James, I think, that how the story went, that he said something to Rick at some type of setting. I don't know if they was in the studio club or whatever. But he told Rick James, like, was telling him about a song, like, yeah, you should have did blah, blah, blah. Well, mother, I'm Rick James. You know, like, you were made off my music. I mean, Rick went in. They was like, Rick just went in on Rockwell. You got one of them. You know how many number one songs I got? I'm Rick James. You better ask. So, man, Rick was mad. Rick had to go smoke and smoke a blunt and calm down. But Rick was just that type of guy. I mean, he's a genius, a musical genius. He could sit there. And matter of fact, he was writing a song for somebody else at the time. And then it's funny because it circled back around where they wanted him to help Rockwell out on like his next album. Like, man, see if Rick want to do something. I think Rick was like, F him. He tried to tell Rick James what to do. Nobody tell Rick what to do. And for those who didn't know on the live chat, we'll go into the other story. Rick has a buddy in the group that played one instrument in the group name. His name was Rick too. His name was Richard something. His name was Rick. And there can only be one Rick. It's Rick James, and I'm the only Rick here. So that was it. So that was ended that argument. And anyway, that was like his buddy. Like musically and everything else, composing songs. Rick could just have a song and write it to the music. He'd just start playing on the keyboard and then write the song right then and there on the spot as he's going on the synthesizer. Rick start writing. Pop, 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 pop. Song is done. Rick could have a whole hits record made just that quick. Riffs and everything. And he could write for anybody and make it a hit. So Rick was multi-talented, but Rick had problems. Rick got high recreationally to keep himself calm. Rick has a lot of energy, and Rick got to smoke to bring himself down to keep from hurting somebody. Rick has a lot of energy. So he had a red Trans Am at this point. And some members in his group were complaining. Man, Rick ain't paying us right, man. Rick ain't did this, man. Rick ain't doing it, man. Did you see how such and such got? Man, it got back to Rick, and Rick was so mad. He came over to the house, and they wasn't even over there. And he was telling somebody else about it. He came over there to smoke, and he ain't had no tops. Rolling paper, and he was upset, and he was like, man, I came all the way over here to get some tops, man. Y'all got, man, I'm telling you, man, these ungrateful mother, they was performing at birthday parties when I met them. That's where they gonna be, performing for $300. Now they got a house and complaining. Ooh, ungrateful mother. So Rick, they called Rick up. Like, yeah, Rick, man, we want to talk. Oh, where y'all at? Y'all at the house right now? Yeah, y'all outside? Yeah, okay, I'm on my way. Next thing you know, they said they were outside, like, having a cookout, and they got a big field, like, out there by the house. It's like, on the side of the house is nothing but grass, like a big old space. So cars pull up sometimes and park over there, and, you know, that's that. Man, Rick came over there. They like, oh, hey, it's Rick. Rick saw them in the red Trans Am, man. He just floored the gas. Oh, Rick tried to run them over. Rick turned around in the grass when he missed and tried to come back and hit him. And people said, you were there, you were just laughing. Ah! I was like, I probably was. I don't remember. Rick was trying to run him down. So Rick ended up pulling off and taking out of there, leaving. And they was, call the cops. Call the police, man. Rick just tried to kill her. Oh, man. So they had people with conflicting stories saying it, so it never went to court or anything like that. Back then, things were just settled. But they wasn't on the next album. They was back, I guess, performing at birthday parties. Oh man. Oh man, what any more Rick stories I know, man? Let me see. That brings us to 86, when Rick was hanging out more with David Bowie and all the rest of the dudes at the Palladium and the Ritz. California life, it took its toll on Rick. Now, remember I told you he had a friend named Rick, but they couldn't even call him Rick. They had to call him Rich because Rick wouldn't allow it. There's only one Rick in the group, and it's Rick James. So him and his Rick didn't really see eye to eye too much no more, but Rich was still like there. You know, he was doing work with everybody else, and Rick's trying to get himself back on top because he had a rough year, man. He had like some rough years, and Rick's trying to come back with that new album, that new feel, and that Flag album just was not it at all. It had some songs that people mess with, like for about a half a second. It was like, man, Rick's out of there. Rick then lost it. So all the attention was going to Michael Jackson and Prince. You know, Michael Jackson and Prince. Michael Jackson and Prince. So Rick became the guy that was being forgotten about. So this wasn't, you know, he didn't have the same pull he had in the clubs as he did before. And once they was like, such and such is coming in, I'm Rick James. I'll kick you in the face with my boot. So Rick, you know, he had a lot of energy. He meant it. Rick could hit somebody in a minute. So the Rick was like, man, if you don't give me my section right now, and they was like, well, we gotta guess. Man, I'm Rick James. They gotta wait. So Rick get in there and takes that, and then the artist come in that was supposed to get it, who I ain't gonna mention right now. But the artist came in who was supposed to get their section, was not very happy, Rick James, then when it took it. And Rick's like, I will share this with you. That's why we do it. We share. So the guy came over, was like, the artist came over there and was like, I cannot. My record company would have a fit if they knew I was in here with Rick James. I'm leaving. Let me know when Rick James is not here. Then I will come back. But I cannot be seen with Rick James. So Rick heard that this certain artist would not want to sit over there with him, and he said okay, and they shook his hand or whatever and was finna break out. Rick took that to offense. So Rick was over there kicking it. Oh man, nobody care about that. Man, I don't care about that no talent mother. So after all this, it's over. It's late at night. Rick James is like, you know what? I know what hotel he's staying at. Let me go over there to the hotel. And Rick seen the car they was in. Rick got out there, and he was talk to the driver, whatever. Like, this the car? You got him? Yeah. He jumped on the hood of the car and started peeing on the car. Rick James got arrested and peed on the man car that's driving him around. Rick got arrested, and when it came down, the first security came in there. Rick went in his boot. Rick kept a switchblade in his boot. Came out there, pulled out a switchblade out the boot, and told him nobody touched me. So the police came. He put the switchblade up. They didn't even know where to find the switchblade. Took him to the station, gave him a little ticket or whatever. He came out, still had the switchblade on him, and they searched him. And a blunt, and a little rolled up joint, rather. That's Rick James, man. It's Rick. That's Rick James. Oh man, there's plenty of stories they told us about Rick, man, but I ain't finna go through all of them tonight. I'm out, man. I'm tired.